My mom and stepdad beat me with a belt for refusing to serve his son like a maid. She said, "He's the king. You clean his toilet." I escaped with nothing but a broken arm and $1 in my pocket. The squeaking started when we were returning home from the children's cafe. Ethan was celebrating his 5th birthday, and I was trying to make it special, even though I was desperately short of money. Working as a secretary at Parker & Sons law firm, I've been barely making ends meet since my divorce from Grant a year ago. "Mom, my robot is making a weird squeaking noise," Ethan said from the back seat, pointing to the blue toy robot he had brought home from kindergarten a few days ago. I glanced in the rearview mirror. My son was holding the toy in his hands, and it was indeed making some strange noises, not the usual cheerful melodies. "The batteries must be running low, sweetie," I replied, turning onto our street. "We'll change them when we get home." But the squeaking was getting louder and more annoying. Ethan wrinkled his nose. "I don't like it like this. Can we throw it away?" "Where did you get it?" I asked, remembering that I hadn't bought this toy. "I found it on the bench in the park, the one where Max and I always sit." It was just lying there, looking so pretty. "Ethan, you know you can't take other people's things." But no one was sitting there, and it's so pretty, with lightning bolts on its chest. I sighed. After the divorce, it was often difficult for me to raise my son on my own. Grant was always stricter, while I tended to give in to my child on minor issues, especially when I see how few toys he has compared to other children. "Okay, but next time ask the teachers. Maybe someone lost it," I said gently. Ethan obediently put the robot down by his feet, but it continued to squeak. The sound was like an alarm clock or some kind of electronic device. I felt a little uneasy. As we approached the house, the squeak turned into a continuous signal. I stopped the car at the entrance to our small 2-story building, where we rented an apartment on the 1st floor. After the divorce, we had to move from the spacious house that Grant kept to this modest apartment in a not-so-great neighborhood. "Mom, why didn't Dad come to my birthday party?" Ethan suddenly asked as he got out of the car. That question always hit my heart like a hammer. Grant hadn't been in his son's life for 3 months. At first, he took Ethan for the weekends, but then he started making excuses not to. Work, business trips, headaches. The last time he called was on Christmas, and even then, he was drunk, yelling something about how I had ruined his life. "Daddy is very busy with work right now, dear," I said, taking a toy out of the car. The squeaking became even louder. "Come on, let's go upstairs." In the apartment, I immediately took the batteries out of the robot, but it didn't stop. On the contrary, the sound became even more piercing. It was strange. Toys usually don't work without batteries. I checked the batteries. They were brand new and fully charged. "Mom, I'm scared," Ethan whispered, snuggling up to me. "Don't be afraid, sweetie. It's just a broken toy." But I was starting to feel uneasy, too. I tried to unscrew the robot's body, but the screws were too tight, as if they had been tightened with a professional tool. The sound did not stop and even seemed to become more rhythmic. I hardly slept that night. I put the toy in the kitchen cupboard, but the squeaking penetrated everywhere. Ethan woke up and cried, saying he was having bad dreams. I took him into my bed and held him tight, trying to calm him and myself. In the morning, when I was driving Ethan to Rainbow Preschool, I decided to go to the car repair shop. Ray Coleman, a man in his mid-40s, worked there and had always helped me with my car since my divorce. He was one of the few people who didn't look at me with pity or judgment after Grant told everyone that I was supposedly an incompetent housekeeper and a bad mother. Rainbow Preschool was located in an old small house with bright yellow walls and a small courtyard with a few benches under the trees. Ethan loved one particular bench, under a large oak tree, where he and his best friend Max always sat after their walks. "Mom, who could have lost a robot on my bench?" Ethan asked as we approached the entrance. "I don't know, dear. Probably one of the children. But it was there for 3 days. I saw it on Monday, on Tuesday, and only picked it up on Wednesday. That surprised me. Usually, the kindergarten cleans the grounds every day, and lost items are handed over to the teachers. Ethan, did you ask Auntie Susan or Auntie Linda about this toy? No. My son lowered his eyes. I was afraid they would take it away. I kissed him on the forehead and took him to his class. Teacher Susan Bricks, a woman in her 50s with a kind smile, greeted me. Good morning, Claire. How was your birthday? Great, thank you. Susan, have you seen anyone lose a toy robot on the kindergarten grounds? She thought for a moment. A robot? No, I don't remember. What happened? Ethan found it on a bench under an oak tree. It had been lying there for several days. That's strange. Usually the janitor, Thomas, checks the grounds every day. But he's been sick lately, and his son is filling in for him. Maybe he missed something. I nodded and said goodbye. Ethan ran to his group, and I drove to Joe's auto repair shop on Maple Street. The workshop was small but tidy. Ray always kept his tools and spare parts in order. When I walked in, he was repairing someone's engine, but he immediately noticed me. Good morning, Claire. What brings you here? Ray, can you take a look at this toy? I asked, taking the robot out of my bag. It beeps all the time, even without batteries. Ray wiped his hands on his overalls and smiled. Sure. Where did you get it? My son found it at kindergarten. Someone lost it, and he picked it up. The squeaking immediately filled the workshop. Ray frowned. Strange thing, he muttered, picking up the toy and turning it over. It doesn't sound like a toy. It's more like... He didn't finish his sentence and walked over to his workbench, where various tools lay. You know, I used to serve in the Army, he said, looking intently at the robot. In the Military Engineering Corps. I learned how to take apart all kinds of devices there. That sound, it reminds me of something. I felt a chill run down my spine. What exactly does it remind you of? I don't know yet. Let me take a closer look at it. Ray took a special screwdriver and began carefully unscrewing the screws on the robot's back. I stood nearby, trying not to think about anything bad. Maybe it's just a technical malfunction, a manufacturing defect, or something like that. Claire, Ray said suddenly, do you remember if any of our friends could have lost this thing near the kindergarten? No. All our friends live in other neighborhoods. And the toy looks pretty expensive, judging by its appearance. Who would just leave it there? When the top of the case opened, Ray suddenly froze. His face instantly turned pale, and his hands began to tremble. What's wrong, Ray? I asked, feeling my heart sink with fear. He carefully placed the toy on the table, took a step back, and looked at me with a serious expression. Claire, listen to me carefully. His voice was quiet but firm. Go straight to the police station on 3rd Street. Now, don't stop, don't ask questions. Take the toy and go. But what's inside? Ray, you're scaring me. I'm serious, Claire. It's not a toy. Go to the police right now. I had never seen Ray like this before. He was usually a calm, unhurried man who liked to joke about politics or football. But now his eyes were filled with such horror that it made me feel uneasy. What about you? I'll go too, but separately. Hurry up, Claire, and don't tell anyone about this until you get to the police station. I grabbed the robot, which was still beeping, and hurried to the exit. My hands were shaking as I got into the car. On the way to the police station, thoughts swirled in my head. What could be inside a child's toy that was so scary that an experienced mechanic and former bomb disposal expert was afraid? Why did Ray turn so pale? And most importantly, how did this thing end up on my son's favorite bench? The police station on 3rd Street was a small brick building with an American flag at the entrance. I parked right outside the door and, holding the squeaky toy, went inside. Excuse me, I said to the sergeant behind the desk, a middle-aged man with graying temples. The mechanic told me to bring this here immediately. He looked at me, then at the toy, and the squeak caught his attention. Just a minute, he said, and disappeared down the hallway. A couple of minutes later, a detective in plain clothes appeared, a man in his 40s with tired eyes and a mop of chestnut hair. I'm Detective Howe, he introduced himself. And you are? Claire Morden. The mechanic told me to bring this toy here, but I don't understand why. The detective took the robot and listened to the squeak. His expression changed. Let's go into my office, Ms. Morden. We need to have a serious talk. Detective Howe's office was cramped and cluttered with files. On the walls hung crime scene photos, marked city maps, and a police academy diploma. He sat me down in a chair across from his desk and carefully placed the toy between us. Ms. Morden, I want you to stay calm, he began, without taking his eyes off the robot. What you brought is not an ordinary toy. What do you mean? My voice trembled. There is an explosive device inside this robot, a homemade bomb with a timer. The world around me spun. I felt the blood drain from my face and my throat go dry. Are you joking? I never joke about things like this. Detective Howe leaned forward. Our technical expert has already confirmed it. The device is set to explode 7 days after activation. Judging by the sound, the timer is already running. I grabbed the edge of the table, trying not to faint. How much is left? About 3 days. Maybe less. My God, I whispered. Ethan held it in his hands. He drove it in his car. He slept next to it. Miss Morden, take a deep breath. The worst is behind you. You brought the device here in time. The detective handed me a glass of water, which I drank in one gulp. What if we hadn't gone to the mechanic? What if Ray hadn't taken the toy apart? It's better not to think about that, said Howe. Tell me in detail how this thing got to your son. I told him everything I knew, how Ethan found the robot on a bench at the kindergarten, how the toy had been lying there for 3 days, about my conversation with the teacher, Susan. The Rainbow Kindergarten on Elm Street? The detective clarified, taking notes. Yes. Ethan says the robot was on his favorite bench under the oak tree. That's where he always sits with his friend Max after their walks. Howe frowned. Did anyone know about your son's habit? What do you mean? Could someone have deliberately placed the device on the bench where your child sits? A chill ran down my spine. The thought that someone deliberately wanted to harm Ethan seemed horrific. I don't know. Maybe the teachers, other parents. What about your ex-husband? Did he know about your son's habits? The mention of Grant caused a sharp pain in my chest. Grant hasn't seen Ethan in 3 months. But before that, yes, he knew about the bench. Ethan told him about the playground when they were still seeing each other. The detective wrote something down. We'll need to talk to your son. He may remember something important. He's still young, only 5 years old. Don't worry, we have specialists who work with children. For now, I want you to go home and not discuss this situation with anyone. We'll start the investigation at the kindergarten. When I picked Ethan up from his class, I tried to look normal, but my hands were shaking and the thought kept running through my head. Someone wanted to hurt my child. Someone deliberately planted a bomb where my son plays. Mom, where's my robot? Ethan asked as he got into the car. It had to be sent for repair, I said, trying to speak calmly. When will it be back? Not soon, dear. At home, I couldn't settle down. I checked the locks on the doors, looked out the window, listened to every sound. Ethan noticed my nervousness. Mom, are you sick? He asked, coming over and touching my hand. No, sweetie. I'm just tired, but that was a lie. I was scared to death. The next day, Detective Howe came to our house with a child psychologist, a woman in her mid-30s named Dr. Lisa Wells. She was gentle and patient and quickly found common ground with Ethan. Ethan, tell me about the robot you found, she asked, sitting down next to him on the sofa. It was blue with silver lightning bolts, my son said. It was very beautiful. I saw it on my bench on Monday when Max and I were playing superheroes. Didn't you take it that day? No, I thought someone had left it there and would come back for it. On Tuesday, it was still there, and on Wednesday, too. Then I decided that no one was looking for it. Detective Howe wrote down every word. Ethan, did you see anyone put the robot on the bench? No. It wasn't there on Monday morning, but it was there after lunch. Who else knows about the bench you and Max use? Ethan thought for a moment. Aunt Susan and Aunt Linda know, and Uncle Thomas, who cleans the yard, and Uncle Mike, who brings food to the cafeteria. Do any of the other children sit on this bench? Sometimes Emmy comes, but she prefers the swings. And Jacob sat there once, but he didn't like it because there were ants crawling around. Dr. Wells smiled. You're a very observant boy. Now tell me, did you notice anyone unfamiliar near the kindergarten during those days? Unfamiliar? Ethan frowned. How would I know if someone was unfamiliar? Well, for example, people you haven't seen near the kindergarten before. There are a lot of people there. Parents come, and grandparents, and Uncle Frank, the mailman. The conversation lasted about an hour, but Ethan couldn't remember anything unusual. After they left, I was left alone with my fears and questions. Detective Howe called me every day to update me on the investigation. They interviewed all the daycare employees, parents, and neighbors. They checked the surveillance cameras in the area, but most of them were broken or poorly configured. The janitor Thomas was indeed sick those days, Howe told me on the phone. He was replaced by his son, Dennison, an 18-year-old boy. He says he didn't pay much attention to the benches, focusing more on the trash cans and the playground. What about the cameras? There's one that shows part of the yard, but it doesn't cover the bench under the oak tree. We can only see people walking past the fence. Every day was a challenge. I couldn't sleep properly, constantly waking up at the slightest noise. I checked Ethan's toys, bag, and clothes. I never let him out of my sight at the nursery. The teachers started looking at me strangely, but I couldn't explain the reason for my behavior. My sister Anne called a week after the incident. Claire, you sound terrible. What's going on? Nothing special. I'm just tired. Don't lie to me. Ethan told Grandma that you stopped sleeping and are constantly checking the locks. I wanted to tell her the truth, but Detective Howe had asked me to keep the information confidential for the time being. The investigation was ongoing, and unnecessary publicity could be detrimental. And just trust me. Everything will be fine. Claire, if this is about Grant... It's not about Grant, I interrupted, although I wasn't sure myself. Could my ex-husband have done something so terrible? Grant was selfish and often irresponsible, but a murderer? It seemed impossible. 2 weeks later, Detective Howe came to see me again. Ms. Morden, I'm afraid we have bad news. We've exhausted all known leads. No witnesses, no fingerprints on the device, no camera footage. What does that mean? The case will be moved to the cold case file. But we're not giving up. If new information comes to light, are you saying that whoever did this will remain at large? For now, yes. But we've increased patrols in the area around the kindergarten and installed additional cameras. I felt the ground slip away from under my feet. Someone wanted to hurt my child and is going unpunished. Someone is walking the same streets, possibly planning another attempt. Detective Howe? What if it happens again? Let's hope it doesn't. But I advise you to be vigilant. You might want to consider transferring your son to another kindergarten. That suggestion finished me off. Ethan loved his kindergarten, his friends, his teachers. But could I risk his safety? I didn't sleep at all that night. I sat by the window, looking out at the dark street, thinking that somewhere out there was a person who wanted to hurt my child. Maybe they were watching us right now. Maybe they were planning another attempt. I picked up the phone and dialed my mother's number. Mom, can Ethan and I come stay with you for a while? Of course, dear. What happened? I'll tell you when we get there. But even the thought of leaving didn't bring any relief. Someone knew where my son lived, knew his habits, and that someone remained unknown and dangerous. I looked at Ethan's sleeping face and vowed to myself I would do anything to protect him, even if it meant changing our whole life. The year passed like one long nightmare. Detective Howe called me in March, exactly 12 months after the toy incident, to officially announce that the case was closed. Ms. Morden, I'm very sorry, but we have no choice. Without new evidence, the case will be archived. His voice sounded tired. I sat in the kitchen, holding the phone in one hand and mechanically sorting through Ethan's toys with the other. I had already checked each one dozens of times, examining them down to the smallest detail. "I understand," I whispered, although I didn't really understand anything. How could I forget that someone wanted to hurt my child? "Claire, you can still contact me if you remember anything new or if there are any suspicious people around." "Thank you." I hung up without listening to the end. Over the past year, my life had changed beyond recognition. At first, I thought I would be able to return to normal in a few months, once my emotions had settled down. But the fear wouldn't let go. On the contrary, it grew and consumed me completely. I transferred Ethan from the Rainbow Kindergarten to another facility, Sunflower, on the other side of town. I had to change my route to work and spend more time on the road, but at least there was no cursed bench under the oak tree there. "Mom, why don't we go to the old kindergarten?" Ethan asked during the first few weeks. "I miss Max and Aunt Susan." "You'll be fine here too," I replied, trying to smile. "You'll make new friends." But Ethan had a hard time adjusting. He was quiet, withdrawn, often sitting alone in a corner. His new teacher, Gloria Hunt, told me that he didn't play with the other children and seemed afraid of something all the time. "Mrs. Morden, maybe you should take Ethan to see a child psychologist," she suggested during one of our conversations. "He seems very anxious." I nodded, but I knew that the problem wasn't just Ethan. The problem was me. My fear was being passed on to my son, infecting him, poisoning our lives. Every morning, I carefully checked his bag, searched his pockets, and inspected his shoes. If there was a party with gifts at the kindergarten, I would arrive early to personally check every toy that Ethan was given. "Claire, you're going too far," Gloria said to me after I showed up in the middle of the day, yet again to take away the ball another child had given my son for his birthday. "I just want to make sure it's safe." "It's just a regular ball from the store." I saw Louisa's mom buy it. But I still took the ball home and cut it open, looking for suspicious devices inside. Of course, there was nothing there but air and rubber fragments. Working at the Parker & Sons law firm became my next challenge. At first, my boss, Gerald Parker, was understanding about my absences. "Claire, I know you're going through a difficult time, but you need to focus on your work," he told me in May. But I couldn't concentrate. Every phone call made me jump. I constantly thought about Ethan, imagining that something was happening to him while I was sitting in the office. What if someone comes to the nursery? What if they put something dangerous there again? I asked myself dozens of times a day. I started calling Sunflower 2 or 3 times a day, asking to talk to Ethan or at least to his teacher. "Mrs. Morden, your son is safe," Gloria assured me. "We have very good security, a modern alarm system." But that wasn't enough for me. I wanted to see Ethan every minute, keep him close, control his every move. In July, what I feared happened. Gerald Parker called me and told me he had to fire me. "Claire, you've missed 42 workdays in the last 3 months. That's unacceptable for any company. But I warned you that I had family circumstances." "I understand, but business is business. I'm sorry, but this is a final decision. Losing my job was a blow, but at the same time, a relief. Now I could spend the whole day with Ethan and personally ensure his safety. But the money quickly ran out. Unemployment benefits only covered part of my expenses. I had to sell my car and switch to public transportation. Then I rented out some of my belongings, including the TV and my mother's gold jewelry. "Claire, what's going on with you?" my sister Anne asked me when she came to visit in August. "You've lost 15 pounds. You look like a ghost." "Everything's fine. I'm just trying to lose weight." "Don't lie. Ethan told me you're checking his toys with an X-ray machine. That was an exaggeration." I did take a few suspicious toys to the hospital where my friend Carol worked and asked her to X-ray them. But that was only 2 or 3 times. "Anne, you don't understand. Someone wanted to hurt Ethan, someone who is still at large." "Claire, that was a year ago. The police investigated and found nothing. Maybe it was just a prank or a mistake." A prank? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. A bomb in a child's toy is a prank? I don't know what it was. But you're ruining your life and Ethan's life with your paranoia. After that conversation, Anne and I didn't talk for 2 months. My mother also began to look at me with concern when I called her at night to tell her about more suspicious noises under the window. "Honey, maybe you should talk to a doctor," she suggested once. "I'm fine. The problem isn't me, it's that everyone has forgotten about the threat." In the fall, I transferred Ethan to a private kindergarten called Little Geniuses, which cost 3 times as much but had better security and fewer children in each group. I had to take out a loan, but my son's safety was more important than money. "Mom, why are we changing kindergartens again?" Ethan asked when I took him to see the new place. "It will be better here, sweetie." More attention for each child, but Ethan didn't look happy. He stopped smiling, played only by himself, and hardly talked to the other children. Child psychologist Dr. Marcus Green, whom I finally took him to see, said that the boy had symptoms of anxiety disorder. "Miss Morden, Ethan is constantly expecting danger. He is afraid of new people, new places, new objects. This is not normal for a 5-year-old child." "What do you suggest?" "Therapy. And perhaps you should think about your own reaction to that situation a year ago." I started taking Ethan to Dr. Green twice a week, but there was minimal progress. The boy remained withdrawn and fearful. I hardly slept at night. I checked the locks 5 or 6 times, listened to every noise. I installed additional locks on the doors and metal bars on the first-floor windows. "Mrs. Morden, maybe it's time to call the police." My neighbor, Mr. Davis, asked me when I was once again walking around the house with a flashlight at 3 in the morning, checking for suspicious traces. "The police aren't helping. They've already closed the case. But you'll scare the whole street with your night walks." I began to avoid my neighbors and rarely left the house unless absolutely necessary. I ordered groceries online and only went to the doctor with Ethan. In December, another shock occurred. Ethan cried at preschool when another child gave him a toy car. "I don't want to take it," he shouted. "What if it explodes?" Gloria from his previous preschool called me that day. "Claire, Ethan told the other children about bombs and toys. Now half the group is afraid to play." The parents are complaining. I realized that my fear had been completely transferred to my son. He was living the same nightmare I had lived. "Maybe we should take a break," the kindergarten director, Mrs. Stevens, told me the next day. "Ethan needs professional help, and our facility is not designed for children with such problems." It was another blow. This was the 3rd kindergarten in a year to kick us out. I sat in the kitchen at night, looking at Ethan's sleeping face as he lay on my lap. He didn't want to sleep in his own room because he was afraid to be alone. "What am I going to do with you, baby?" I whispered, stroking his hair. Over the course of a year, I had turned into a paranoid woman who was afraid of her own shadow. I lost my job, my friends, and the trust of my relatives. Most importantly, I ruined my son's childhood. But I couldn't stop. Every time I tried to relax, a voice echoed in my head. What if the person who planted the bomb is watching us? What if he's waiting for me to let my guard down? Detective Howe didn't call again. The case was closed, archived, forgotten. Everyone except me went on with their lives as if nothing had happened, and I was left alone with my fears, which grew stronger and more destructive with each passing day. We celebrated New Year's Eve at home, alone. I couldn't imagine taking Ethan to a celebration with lots of people where someone could approach him with a dangerous gift. "Mom, why aren't we going to Grandma's for New Year's?" Ethan asked, watching TV. "Because it's safer at home," I replied, checking the locks once again. My mother called every day, trying to convince me to come. "Claire, you can't live like this. A child has the right to a normal childhood. He will have a normal childhood when I am sure that nothing threatens him. When will that happen? In a year? In 5 years? In 10 years? I didn't know the answer to that question. January brought new challenges. I had almost no money left, and it was impossible to find a job that would allow me to control Ethan's safety. I tried freelancing, typing texts at home, but the earnings were meager. "Claire, maybe it's time to get real?" Anne said to me when we finally made up. "Ethan has to go to school in the fall. You can't keep him at home forever." The thought of school gave me a panic attack. School meant hundreds of children, dozens of teachers, a huge area that was impossible to control. "I'll teach him at home," I said. "Claire, that's crazy. You don't have a teaching degree. You don't have money for materials. You don't have—" "I have the most important thing, the desire to protect my child." But even homeschooling turned out to be a problem. Ethan couldn't concentrate, constantly distracted by the sounds outside the window. If the phone rang or someone knocked on the door during class, he would start crying. "Mom, what if the bad man comes to us?" He would ask me every night before bed. "He won't, sweetie. I won't let him." "What if you fall asleep?" "I'm not sleeping. I'm always watching." And that was true. I slept 2 or 3 hours a day, spending the rest of the time in a semi-drowsy state, listening to every sound. In February, I began to notice that we were being watched. At first, it was a gray sedan that appeared on our street too often. Then a man in a dark jacket whom I saw near the store several days in a row. "Anne, I think we're being watched," I told my sister on the phone. "Claire, stop it. No one is following you. I've seen the same man 3 days in a row. Maybe he lives in the neighborhood. Maybe he works nearby." But I knew it wasn't a coincidence. Someone was waiting for the right moment to strike again. I started writing down everything suspicious, the times I saw strangers, the license plate numbers of cars parked nearby, the sounds I heard at night. I accumulated a whole notebook of observations. "Mom, you're always writing something," Ethan said to me one day. "What are you writing?" "I'm writing down important things so I don't forget." "Can I see?" "No, sweetie." This is grown-up stuff. Dr. Green advised me to stop writing. "Ms. Morden, your fixation on danger only increases anxiety, both yours and Ethan's. But what if I miss something important? What if you're missing the most important thing in your son's life?" His words hit me hard. I was indeed missing out on Ethan's life, turning him into a prisoner of my own fears. March was particularly difficult. The anniversary of the day we found the bomb was approaching. I didn't sleep at all, checking every corner of the apartment several times a day. Ethan was also feeling the tension and became even more withdrawn. "Claire, you have to pull yourself together," my mother said when she arrived unannounced. "Looking at you makes me want to cry." I really did look terrible. I had lost so much weight that my clothes hung off me like sacks. I had deep circles under my eyes, my hair was uncombed, and my hands were constantly shaking. "Mom, I can't relax. Do you understand? I can't." "Then you need professional help." But I refused to go to a psychiatrist. I was afraid they would declare me unfit and take Ethan away. Then who would protect him? When Detective Howe called that March day to tell me the case was closed, I realized I was on my own. Officially, the crime no longer existed. Officially, there was no threat. But I knew better. I knew that somewhere out there was a person who wanted to hurt my child, and as long as they were free, my son was in danger. The Fresh Mart supermarket on Oak Street was the only place I dared to go with Ethan. It had wide aisles, good lighting, and security guards at every exit. I always took a cart and carefully planned my route between the aisles so that I could see all the approaches at all times. It was a warm April day, and I decided to finally restock our food supplies. For the past 2 weeks, we had been living on pasta and canned food that I ordered online, but I didn't have any money left for delivery. "Mom, can I have some chocolate bars?" Ethan asked, pointing to the brightly packaged bars at the checkout. "No, dear. We don't know who made them." That was my standard response to all his requests for sweets. I only bought products that I could check: unpackaged vegetables, bread baked in front of me, milk in transparent bottles. As we passed the toy section, Ethan slowed down and looked longingly at the shelves with toy cars and building blocks. "Can I just look?" he asked. "Just a minute," I agreed, although every second in that section made me anxious. Ethan carefully touched a red fire truck without lifting it off the shelf. Over the past year, he had learned not to ask for toys, knowing that I would not allow him to take them anyway. "It's beautiful," he whispered. "Yes, it is," I agreed, feeling my heart ache with pity. My son dreamed of a normal toy car, and I couldn't give it to him because of my own fears. "Claire? Claire Morden?" I turned sharply at the familiar voice. Standing next to us was a woman in her 30s with short blonde hair and bright green eyes. Tess Campbell, my old college friend whom I hadn't seen in almost 3 years. "Tess!" I tried to smile, but I felt awkward. I looked terrible, and Tess would surely notice. "My God, it's been so long." She came closer and gave me a big hug. "Is this Ethan? You've grown so much." Ethan hid behind my back, as he always did when meeting strangers. "Hi," he muttered quietly. "He's a little shy," I explained. "That's okay. I remember you always saying he was a very smart boy." Tess smiled. "How are you doing?" "I heard that you and Grant broke up. The mention of my ex-husband caused the usual pain in my chest." "Yes, we've been divorced for 2 years now." "That's a shame. You looked so good together." Tess shook her head. "Have you made up with Grant yet?" I didn't understand her question. "What do you mean?" "Well, I saw him at Ethan's kindergarten a year ago. He was holding a toy. I thought he had brought a gift for his son to make up with you." The world around me spun. The blood drained from my face and my throat went dry. When did you see him?" "A year ago in the spring. I don't remember the exact date, but it was warm. I was driving past the kindergarten, what's it called? Rainbow. And I saw Grant standing by the fence. Are you sure it was him?" "Of course." Grant is hard to miss with his height and curly hair. He was standing at the entrance with a blue toy in his hands. I even wanted to stop and talk, but I was late for work. I grabbed the handle of the stroller, trying not to fall. A blue toy. A year ago, near the Rainbow Kindergarten. "Claire, are you okay? You look pale." "Tess," my voice trembled, "can you remember the exact day?" Let me think. It was a Wednesday because I took my car in for a technical inspection, and my technical inspection was on March 19th. Yes, definitely the 19th. March 19th. The day Ethan found the robot on the bench, the day our nightmare began. "Claire, what's wrong?" "You're scaring me." I couldn't answer. One terrible thought kept running through my head. Grant. Grant did this. My ex-husband wanted to hurt his own son. "Mom," Ethan tugged at my sleeve, "are you okay?" Everything's fine, sweetie," I whispered, trying to pull myself together. "Tess, what was he doing near the kindergarten? Did he go inside?" "No, he was just standing by the fence, looking at the playground. I thought he was waiting to meet you or Ethan." "And the toy? Did you see it clearly?" "A blue robot, quite a big one. He was holding it in his hands like a gift." I felt sick. I felt the floor slipping away from under my feet. "Sorry, Tess, I have to go," I said, turning the cart around. "Claire, wait! What's wrong? Did I say something wrong?" "No, it's fine. It's just late." I hurried to the checkout, leaving Tess standing confused among the toys. Ethan ran after me, trying to catch up. "Mom, why are we walking so fast?" "We haven't bought milk yet." "We'll buy it later," I replied automatically, paying for the groceries with trembling hands. On the way home, thoughts swirled in my head. Grant near the kindergarten with a toy. The very day Ethan found the robot on the bench. It couldn't be a coincidence. "Mom, who was that man Auntie was talking about?" Ethan asked as we entered the apartment. "No one special, dear." But that was a lie. Grant was not no one. He was a man who wanted to harm his own son. A man who planted a bomb in a child's toy. I sat Ethan down to watch cartoons and went into the kitchen. My hands were shaking so badly that I could barely dial Detective Howe's number. Detective Howe here. "This is Claire Morden. I have new information about the toy case. Ms. Morden, I already told you that the case is closed. My ex-husband was near the kindergarten that day. I interrupted him. A witness saw Grant Steele with a blue toy in his hands at the exact moment my son found the robot. There was silence on the other end of the line. Are you sure about this information? Absolutely. My friend Tess Campbell saw him with her own eyes on March 19th at 9 a.m. near the Rainbow Kindergarten. Miss Morden, please come to the station. We need to talk in detail. After the call, I sat in the kitchen, shivering from the cold, even though the apartment was warm. Grant, the man I had lived with for 7 years, the father of my child, the person I trusted with the most precious thing in my life. Why? For what? What had I done to him that was so terrible that he decided to punish me through our son? I remembered our last conversation 3 months ago. Grant called drunk, screaming that I had ruined his life, that I had taken away everything he had achieved, but I thought it was just drunken ramblings. "You'll take everything from me," he yelled then, "but I won't let you win." At the time, those words seemed meaningless to me. Now they took on a terrible meaning. "Mom, why are you crying?" Ethan appeared in the kitchen with his favorite stuffed animal, a teddy bear that I had carefully checked hundreds of times. "I'm not crying, dear. I'm just tired. Can I eat an apple?" "Of course." I took an apple out of the refrigerator and, as always, washed it thoroughly and examined it for suspicious dents or punctures. It was a habit that had become automatic during a year of paranoia. When Ethan went to finish his apple in front of the TV, I picked up the phone again and dialed Tess's number. "Tess, it's Claire. I'm sorry I left so abruptly." "Claire?" I was worried. "What happened? Can you tell me again about seeing Grant near the kindergarten?" "Sure, but why is it so important?" I couldn't tell her the truth, not now. "Just trying to figure some things out." "You said he was standing by the fence?" "Yes, by the main entrance. He was looking at the playground. He was holding a blue toy, a robot or something like that." "Was he waiting for someone? Talking to anyone?" "No, he was standing alone. I saw him for about 30 seconds as I drove by. I thought he was there to see Ethan. Tess, can you testify to that officially? Give a statement to the police." "The police?" "Claire, what's going on? It's a long story, but I really need your help." "Of course, but you're scaring me." After talking to Tess, I began to gather all my memories of Grant from the past few years. How he changed after the divorce, how he started drinking, how he yelled at me on the phone, how he accused me of ruining his career, even though he lost his job because he was always skipping work. I remembered how he said, "If I can't be happy, then no one will be." At the time, it seemed like drunken ramblings. "Mom, when is Dad coming to see us?" Ethan suddenly asked. "I don't know, dear." "Does he love me?" That question pierced me through and through. How do you explain to a 5-year-old that his father might have wanted to hurt him? "Of course he loves you," I lied. "It's just that adults sometimes have complicated situations." But in reality, I no longer knew how Grant felt about his son. If he really did plant the bomb, what did that say about his feelings? In the evening, when Ethan fell asleep, I sat by the window for a long time, looking at the dark street. A year of horror, paranoia, sleepless nights. And now it turns out that the culprit was there all along. The man I once loved and trusted, Grant Steele, the father of my son, the man who wanted to hurt his own child to get back at me. Tomorrow I'll go to the police and tell them everything I know. Tomorrow a new investigation will begin. But will I ever be able to forgive myself for not suspecting my own husband a year ago? Would Ethan ever be able to forget that his father had wanted to hurt him? These questions tormented me until morning, when I finally dozed off in a chair by the window, clutching Detective Howe's phone number tightly in my hand. Detective Howe looked tired when I showed up at the station the next morning. He had dark circles under his eyes, and his 3rd cup of coffee that morning sat on the table. "Ms. Morden, tell me everything from the beginning," he said, turning on the tape recorder. I recounted my conversation with Tess in detail, leaving out nothing. Hove took careful notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions. Is your friend willing to give official testimony? Yes, she's waiting for your call. Good. Now tell me about your relationship with your ex-husband. When was the last time you spoke? What was his mood like? Did he make any threats? I told him about Grant's drunken phone calls, his accusations, how he yelled that I had ruined his life. He lost his job at the Creative Plus advertising agency in December 2 years ago, I said. He blamed me for turning the management against him, even though I didn't even know his colleagues. And the reason for the divorce? Grant started drinking after Ethan was born. Not much at first, but more and more every year. He became aggressive and unpredictable. I was afraid to leave the child alone with him. The detective nodded. Were there any incidents of violence? He never hit me physically, but he yelled and broke things. Once he threw a plate at the wall near Ethan. The boy was so scared that he wet his bed for a week. Did he try to maintain a relationship with his son after the divorce? At first, yes, but his visits became less and less frequent. The last time he saw Ethan was in December 2 years ago. Howe opened a folder and took out several photographs. Mrs. Morden, we checked the surveillance cameras near the kindergarten during that period. Most of the recordings had been erased, but one had been recovered. He showed me a black and white image from the camera. It showed a man standing by the kindergarten fence. The quality wasn't great, but the silhouette looked familiar. Does this look like your ex-husband? I stared at the blurry figure. The height, build, posture, everything resembled Grant. Maybe, but it's hard to say for sure. I understand, but together with your friend's testimony, that's enough to get a search warrant. I started to shake. Are you going to search his house? His apartment. He's been renting a 1-bedroom apartment on Maple Street since he divorced you. I didn't know where Grant had been living for the past few years. We hadn't been in touch, except for those few drunken phone calls. Detective Howe, what if you don't find anything? Then we'll keep looking. But if your ex really did plant that bomb, he's hiding the evidence somewhere. Homemade explosives aren't something you can make without training. I barely slept for the next 2 days, waiting for news. Tess gave her statement to the police, confirming all the details of our conversation at the supermarket. Claire, what if it's true? She asked me on the phone. What if Grant really... I don't know, I replied honestly. I just hope the truth finally comes out. The call from Detective Howe came on Thursday evening. Mrs. Morden, you need to come to the station. We've arrested your ex-husband. My heart was beating so hard I could barely speak. You found evidence? Come in. I'll tell you everything in person. I asked my neighbor, Mrs. Davis, to sit with Ethan and went to the police station. The atmosphere at the station was tense. Several detectives were rushing between offices with folders in their hands. Howe met me at the entrance. Miss Morden, what we found in your ex-husband's apartment shocked even us. He led me into his office and showed me several plastic bags containing physical evidence. Schematics for making homemade explosive devices, he explained, showing me the sheets of paper. Online correspondence with a seller of explosives components. And this, the last bag contained photographs. Photos of Ethan at kindergarten, taken from a distance. My son on the playground, on a bench under an oak tree, near the entrance to the building. My God, I whispered, he was watching him. Judging by the dates on the photos, he had been watching Ethan for several weeks before planting the device. And did he confess? Howe shook his head. He's refusing to talk so far. He's demanding a lawyer. Can I see him? That's not advisable, Mrs. Morden. Please, I need to hear it from him personally. The detective looked at me for a long time, then nodded. All right, but only for 5 minutes, and only in the presence of security. Grant was sitting in the interrogation room, handcuffed to the table. He had changed a lot in the years since the divorce. He had lost weight, his face was wrinkled, his hair was thinning, but his eyes were the same, cold, full of malice. Claire, he said when I walked in, are you here to mock me? Why, Grant? My voice trembled. Why did you want to hurt your own son? He laughed, but there was no joy in it. My own son. You took him away from me 2 years ago. You forbade me to see him, turned him against me. I never forbade you to see Ethan. You stopped coming on your own. That's a lie. You made the child afraid of me. When I came, he hid behind your back and didn't want to talk to me. He was afraid because you came drunk, you yelled at him. Grant leaned forward, hatred flashing in his eyes. You took everything from me, Claire. My job, my home, my son. Did you think you won? I didn't take anything from you. You destroyed everything yourself with your drinking. If I can't be a happy father, then let there be no one, he whispered. If Ethan can't be my son, let him be no one's. Those words hit me like a slap in the face. I realized that the man I had lived with for 7 years had always been a stranger to me. I never knew his true face. You wanted to kill your own child, I whispered. Kill him? Grant laughed. No. I wanted to cripple him, so that you would remember for the rest of your life what you had to pay for your cruelty. I felt sick. I got up and quickly left the room without saying another word. Detective Howe supported me in the hallway. Mrs. Morden, are you all right? No, I answered honestly. But at least now I know the truth. The trial lasted 4 months. Grant's lawyer tried to prove that my ex-husband was mentally ill, but a psychiatric evaluation showed that he was fully aware of his actions. Tess testified as a key witness. Experts confirmed that the diagrams found in Grant's possession were identical to the device that was in operation. Correspondence with the seller of the components was the final piece of evidence. The defendant, Grant Steele, is found guilty of attempted grievous bodily harm and terrorism, Judge Marshall announced in October. He is sentenced to 15 years imprisonment. I sat in the courtroom and cried, not out of joy or relief, but out of grief. Grief for the life that could have been, for the man I once loved and who, it turned out, never existed. After the trial, Detective Howe approached me. Ms. Morden, justice has been served. Your son is safe. Thank you for everything, I said, shaking his hand. What are your plans now? To live. To try to live a normal life. But it was impossible to live a normal life in the same city where so many horrors had taken place. A month after the trial, I decided to move. Mom, will we have to change schools? Ethan asked when I told him about my plans. Yes, dear, but the new school will be better. Won't there be bad people there? No, there won't. The bad man is in prison and will never see us again. I never told Ethan that the bad man was his father. Maybe someday when he's older, I'll tell him. But for now, he's too young for such a terrible truth. We moved to Oklahoma City in December. I found a job at a small accounting firm where the manager, Robert Chen, turned out to be a very understanding person. Ms. Morden, everyone has a past, he said during the interview. What matters is how we move forward. Ethan started at a new school, Dawn Elementary. At first, he was afraid and kept his distance from the other children, but gradually he began to open up. I have a friend, he told me a month later. His name is Sammy. He showed me his collection of Pokemon cards. It was the first time in 2 years that Ethan had mentioned being friends with someone. We continued to see a psychologist, now Dr. Ryan Cooper. He was younger than Dr. Green, but seemed more understanding. Ethan is making great progress, he told me after another session. The nightmares have become less frequent, and he is less afraid of new people. What about the long-term effects? The scars will remain. But children are very resilient. With the right support, he will be able to live a full life. I also started seeing a psychologist. Dr. Sarah Lindsay helped me deal with my guilt and fear. Claire, you are not to blame for what happened, she repeated at every session. You couldn't have predicted the actions of a mentally ill person. But I lived with him for 7 years. How could I not know him? People are good at hiding their dark side, especially from those closest to them. Gradually, I learned not to check the locks 5 times a night, not to search through every one of Ethan's toys, not to see a threat in every stranger. It was a long process. Many times I broke down and returned to my old habits, but every day became a little easier. In the spring, Ethan brought home an invitation to a classmate's birthday party. "Mom, can I go?" he asked. The old me would have said no automatically, but the new me thought about it and nodded. "Of course, dear." "Let's go pick out a gift." At the toy store, I watched Ethan choose a construction set for his friend. He was focused and serious, like a little adult. "He'll like this one," he said, pointing to a set with spaceships. "Are you sure?" "Yes, Sammy loves space, just like me." I smiled. My son had friends, dreams, and hobbies again. He was happy. In the evenings, when Ethan was asleep, I would sometimes sit in the kitchen with a cup of tea and think about the path we had traveled. From the paranoid woman I was a year ago to the person who is learning to live again. The scars remain, both for me and for Ethan. But we survived. We went through hell and stayed together. It's not a fairy tale happily ever after. It was something better. Real life with its complications, but with hope for the future. Sometimes I think about Grant in prison. Does he regret what he did? Does he understand the pain he caused his own son? Probably not. People capable of such acts rarely feel true remorse. But that's not my problem. My problem is to give Ethan a happy childhood despite what happened, to teach him to trust people, to love, to dream. And so far, we're succeeding. Bit by bit, day by day, smile by smile.